going through his work phone, I realized there was about $50,000 of money that had been just siphoned out.
Welcome back to another episode of the Skid Steer Nation podcast. As always, I am your host, Ryan. And before we get introducing our guests today, I just want to take one moment. If you have been listening to the podcast, enjoying the content and the stories of the entrepreneurs we've been had on there, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it at. And do me a favor and share it on social media platforms so that we can get some exposure. As you know, we collect no marketing money from this podcast. We are doing it all for you. Now, I do push attachments from Skid Steer Nation, but that is it. So with no further ado, let's jump into this week's guest. Guys, get ready to be kind of blown away. It's a pretty incredible story. Our guest today is Reese Alley. He's kind of an unstoppable force. He and his partner own Adams and Alley. They specialize in stormwater and infrastructure construction and repair. Here's the kicker. Reese got started at the age of 15, hustling to earn money for a car, developed it into a landscaping business, had employees at the age of 16, and now he's at the ripe old age of 22 and a CEO of a company doing more than $4 million annually. This is an amazing journey of a young entrepreneur. Parents, this is a show that you should have your kids listen to. Sometimes hearing a story from somebody a little bit more relatable in age or not their parents could help inspire, motivate, and provide some practical tips for them to get out there and carve their space in the world. So with no further ado, Reese, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me, man. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is going to be pretty exciting. So, and we got to start right at the top, man. 15 years old, and you're hustling out there. And just give us a little bit of background story on that, and like what was your motivation for that, and where did it kind of take you over the next 12, 18 months?
Absolutely. So originally, it was just a way to save up and get a vehicle. I think everybody starts in the same boat when they're 14 or 15 and they're looking at getting into the very first vehicle, a slice of freedom. And I grew up in a fairly nice area, but both my parents worked, and it was sort of up to me to get a vehicle, and I had to save up for that, obviously. And so I tried to interview at Chick-fil-A and Publix in my area. I got turned down because I didn't have a car, and the only other option there was just bang on every door in the neighborhood and seeing who would let me do something for $10 an hour or $20 or $100 or whatever. And that's kind of where it all started, and it spiraled up from there.
Yeah, you hear so many stories of young kids like either newspaper routes or mowing grass. So is that kind of the avenue you went into, as the grass mowing at that age?
Yeah, it all started as just a landscaping business. So we would just trim bushes and cut grass and stuff like that. When I was 15, obviously didn't have a car yet. And so there was a friend of mine who's a year older that had his license and had a pickup truck. It was like a 06 Silverado, just single cab. And so we would split the money, and I would get all the jobs and he'd drive us around. And that's how it originally started. That never went past the age of 15 as far as that arrangement. But that was originally how I got started and doing stuff that I couldn't walk to in the neighborhood.
So that's that hustle, man, that kids need to have. Like, hey, a little sacrifice of cash for the ability to make some money. It's not all handed to us. You got to make arrangements sometimes with some other people to get things done. And it's rare to hear somebody at 15 that has the foresight to say, hey, I'll do the hard work on the back end. You split the work on the front end, and we'll split the profits equally. That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Pretty cool. So 16. I read somewhere that you had some employees and you were trying to figure out payroll and HR.
Yeah, I think payroll and HR probably came a little bit later. I don't think anybody knows what taxes are at 15 or 16. If you do, you were farther along than I was. But it was just collecting checks and cash and envelopes and stuff like that. I've still got a bag of checks from that time period where it's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, of just little $20, $30, $40 that are fun to look at now. But as that scaled up, when I was 16, I did get a couple of guys that started working with me just after school, on weekends, and all day during the summer. And that was the original operation. We would mow like 3 or 4 days a week and then do install jobs on the last day. And then I would always work Saturday and Sunday. And that's how that started. And from that point, that was like the first organization that I ever had of any kind of consistent business. And that blew up to about 50 or 60 accounts. A little over 50 of those were yearly contracts. And so it'd just be a little bit cheaper per month price, and we do it all year. And later on, when I was 17, I sold those accounts that's how I got out of the first business, to a friend who's in the area who's still operating his business today, and just sold those to him. And because they were yearly, they were sellable, and I could get something out of them, which was nice. That was a hidden benefit that came out later. And then from that point, that's when I got into my first, and this is all 100% me. There were no partners at any point like that. And at that point, I used that to get into excavation, grading, stuff like that, which is eventually where I niched down into drainage and water control, stuff like that.
Nice. So 17 years old and you're starting an excavation company.
Yeah.
Safe to assume that one of the big hurdles for you was customers looking at you and saying, what in the world do you know about grading or drainage?
Yeah, I think nobody really cared while we were in maintenance and doing those kind of small ticket stuff, because there's not really anything you can do to mess up somebody's house on things that are less than $1,000. You're not going to bust somebody's septic tank trimming bushes. But once you do get into the higher ticket items that are $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 and above, people start really considering that, because it's a significant investment for them, and they want to know it's going to someone that's going to take care of them. And so out of that fear of not getting those projects because of my age, I think I just went so far into the extra and second and third mile to make sure the communication was perfect and as good as it could possibly be, and that everything was as professional as it could possibly be. My contracts and my and anything I would give customers, I was very cognizant of the fact I was young. And so trying to overcompensate for all of that ended up developing a pretty significant advantage, in my opinion, of some of the professional aspects where other people might lack, that could be 50 or 60 or 70 years old, that are, I guess, the older experienced people. So I gained a lot of traction there just by overkilling on those things, rather than trying to rely on just the same things everybody else was, just going the extra mile. And they will overlook that, I promise.
And if anyone listening to multiple episodes, like, this has to sound like a beating a dead horse comment, but being professional, answering the phone, walking through the steps of the project, and being available, I'm telling you, you're 80% of the head of the curve.
100%.
It's the quickest thing you can change as a business owner. Like, there's no investment. It takes you zero time to answer the phone call. You don't have to build a website. And I even tell guys, put another shirt in your truck so you don't walk in filthy when you go do estimates after doing a job, and you'd be shocked at the outcome.
Yeah. And even if you don't have to have an $80,000 F-250 to go to a job site, even if it's an older vehicle, just keep it clean, keep it presentable. Don't have bottles falling out of the truck when you get out on a job site. So that kind of stuff matters.
It does. We always say that it's like looking into a mirror. You want to work with like-minded people. And if you walk up to a nice home and they're taking good care of it, and you walk up looking unprofessional and like you just got out of bed, they don't want you on your property.
100%.
And, granted, you might look like that after working on their property all day, sweating in the heat, but they don't want you first impression being that.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, that's good advice right there. And to me, that what your story's saying is that professionalism and that communication, I mean, it overcame age, and the age is usually a stigma that's very difficult to overcome. I owned my first business at 25, and I didn't have any respect in the industry for the first 5 years.
Yeah. It's tough to get around, but I do believe if you overkill and you go the extra and second and third mile, then it will pay off eventually, and people will give you a shot. It did take me 9 months to sell my first install job. I do want to point that out. I mean, it wasn't from the time that I was trying to transition out of maintenance, it took 9 months to sell a sod job, which was my first job in the thousands.
Okay.
And what we ended up doing a lot of, but it took a long time, because until you win one or two, you really don't know how to price anything, or what's competitive, or what's too high. And you got to go at least far enough to get a couple wins, because there's no data otherwise. But
yeah,
it will eventually come around.
Absolutely. So at 17, you're doing sod installs, you're transitioning to excavation. When would you consider yourself like a legitimate excavation company? At what age, and what were you doing?
I would say probably 18. So the best month I did when I was 18 was 42,000. And it was a mix of retaining wall projects and then grading jobs and sod jobs, which, when I say excavation company, I don't believe we're an excavation company now. I mean, we're a stormwater business, but obviously excavation comes in all shapes and sizes within that industry. So to answer that question, I would say 18 is when I really started using I was using heavy equipment, being skid steers and mini excavators on every job. And now we have bigger stuff like it's 45, 50, 60,000 pound machines. However, at that time, that was about the age that I started using that stuff full time. And that was still all rentals and things like that. And then when I was 19, right after I turned 19 was when I bought my first skid steer. And that was a TL10.
Nice. Buying the skid steer, what was the deciding factor for you? Like, at what point did you say, okay, it's time to?
It was 100% ego and wanting to have a machine and put my logo on it, to be honest. I had, at that time, it was in January. It was late January that year, which is a stupid time to buy a machine, in my opinion, for my situation. And I had more than 4 weeks of jobs sold out. And I thought there was just no turning back. Spring's a few months away and it's time to go spend $80,000. And so that's what I did. And I don't want to say I just threw it out there. It's a program where you can lease to own. And so if you know you're going to buy it, you do put a little money down. And then it's like if you rent it for 6 months and then it'll go to equity if you do buy the machine. But there is a little bit of skin in the game. But either way, not to get too in depth about that, that was the decision. And I think purchasing that machine, my payment was like $2,000 something a month for that first 6 months before I bought it. And I had already been renting machines for a long time. And so the fear of not being able to buy it at the end of the 6 months was so pressing. I think it was just working nights and weekends and all over the place trying to keep the thing moving. So it was a great spur in my side as far as getting started. But if I had to do it again, I would have rented a heck of a lot longer. I think it was premature, but it was a great machine.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer though that like when you're about 80% of where you're comfortable to like make the jump, whether it's buying equipment or going full time, make the decision and go do it. And I call it burning the boats. Like you get rid of all the backup plans and like you have no option but success. And it spurs you along. Like, maybe you wouldn't have done those extra 5 or 10 hours a week if you were just renting and you didn't need it.
Yeah. It's painful to watch it sit. That's
for sure. It really is. It really is. So what got you into stormwater? Like why did you pick that niche?
So one of my original mentors and to now who I'm partnered with in one of the businesses today, he was the one that convinced you to buy a Takeuchi because he had a connection there. And he was also in stormwater. At that time, he was running probably like 1.2 million a year and had been doing that steady for a long time. And he was just doing drainage and he did some homeowner jobs and things like that. But a lot of it was for associations and engineers and things like that. The engineers working for the owners. And a lot of it was in stormwater. And I was still all in residential at that point. And there were the problems that I had coming up was, I think residential, and this can be an advantage and a disadvantage depending on if you know how to use it. But there's lots of opinions in residential, right? And so opinions are expensive and abrasive when you're trying to get jobs done. And so, rather than doing like, patios or walls, we might bust up a brand new retaining wall and it looks fantastic, but they didn't know that there's going to be a different batch and the color's like 2 shades off and now they want their money back and just stuff like that. If his logic was with drainage, that if it's underground, nobody can complain about it. And so that was the whole logic. And then, so I was just thinking to myself, well, that's time to get niche down and go to drainage. And that's what I did. And I think that's reigned true, but I will put a comment on that. I think residential, I've been talking with a lot of guys about going from residential and everybody wants to get into commercial because they see all these super big ticket projects. And I got a signature on a retaining wall in a customer's backyard, totally residential, nobody else involved, just a customer. Now we had an engineer involved, but it was a $525,000 project in a customer's backyard. And that's the biggest residential project that I've ever done. I've done bigger commercial, but that's the biggest residential. And the expectations that were set are absolutely bulletproof. And that will be an advantage on that job. And I think people get the wrong rap with residential because they don't manage expectations and they start blaming it on the customers, which is what I did for years.
Yeah.
But you do understand that if you learn how to manage those things, it can be a tremendous advantage.
No, absolutely. And I'm a firm believer in that you have to have a niche. So I want to kind of take a half a step back. When you made the decision to like be in a specific niche and focus on one specific type of problem, what did you notice with your business?
Well, first and foremost, we started getting a lot more of those jobs for one thing, but on the jobs that we would go to, I still took things on the side. And like if we were just doing drainage at that time, then we still took walls and things like that just to keep things moving. But when we started to only become like a drainage company, on jobs where there was a lot of drainage, it was so much easier to sell myself at a higher price and set those kinds of expectations and differentiate myself, because the homeowner at that time, still being residential, might have called us out there to take a look at a washout problem. And while they might need a few other things, it was much easier on the estimate to convey, hey, we are the specialists that can solve this kind of thing. And I understand there's going to be some other people bidding on these jobs, and I get that. That's no problem. But just make sure they're going to be able to take care of these issues. And these are the kinds of materials that we use for this kind of problem and why these are the best. And you can explain yourself a lot better. And you now have a fabricated advantage on that bid. And I think that's really strong.
Yeah, I call it domain authority. Like you become the specialist, you have the authority in that niche in your area. And we've worked with countless company owners and smaller 1, 2, 3-man crews. And when they finally get them to wrap their head around not being a general land service or excavation company and have a specific niche, it's usually 6 months. And they're like, I can't believe the growth.
Yeah.
And my example is that the septic company has all the equipment to grade your driveway, remove some trees in your backyard, but you never even think to call them for that type of work.
Yep. And likewise, you don't think to call anybody else when you have a septic problem.
Exactly.
You call the septic company.
Yeah. And I don't know if you run into this with other guys in your area, like especially guys starting out, but like, hey, I got a skid steer, I can do some work for you. And I'm like, that's like a painter saying I have a ladder. Like the skid steer is just a tool. Like it's not your, like you're supposed to be providing solutions, not a tool.
If you got a valid credit card, everybody's got a skid steer when you go to the rental store.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. So that's like finding that niche is so important. And you've taken that niche and you've grown the heck out of it in a very short amount of time. So from 18 to 22, you've stayed in the storm or drainage industry. What was your transition to where you are today?
So there was a lot of things that happened in between the time frame that we're trying to condense into a phone call. But with the time where I scaled from, I basically bulletproof. There were ups and downs, but I felt pretty bulletproof from zero when I was 15 to around 40 to 60,000 a month was a really great spot for me when I was, I was later 18, early 19. And at that time where I got a bigger shop. I got a 1/2-acre lot in Marietta, which is a city near me, and that I worked around. And it had a 3,000 square foot building that I used as a laydown yard. And I immediately hired double the in-house staff. I still was using a couple subs at that time. And so I got another sub and I hired double the staff. So I had 9 W-2s and then 2 subcontractors running full time. And so there was give or take 15 people running around. And at that point, it kind of fell apart because there was a lot of things I didn't understand that were significant that I was trying to push down and ignore, specifically being a salesman that I had hired that I had been working so hard and I was working such long hours and Saturdays and Sundays and in the middle of the night moving equipment and just trying to keep up with everything. When I finally hired a couple of those, what I thought key positions, I didn't train anybody. He said that he was good to go. I let him do 2 estimates and then he was on his own. And that ended up being a siphon. He would basically just take the jobs and then say he was the owner because he was obviously old enough and it made sense. Take the deposits, block their number. And when I had to fire him 6 months later, going through his work phone, I realized there was about $50,000 of money that had been just siphoned out. And I was so strung out at that point, doing about $80,000 to $100,000 a month that that's $20,000 a week or more. That's just flying around and I didn't notice. And it was just one of those things where I saw a lot of red flags and I saw a lot of things that were going wrong. And I didn't act on it because I was over leveraged and I beat myself into a corner, which is something I didn't want to do again. And then, so coming around circle, when I was later 19, early 20, I wanted to just get out. I hired an ex-convict that ended up beating the snot out of one of my guys on a job site. And that was that's just a random fact, but it was the same week, the engine in my skid steer blew up because the guys didn't put any oil in it. And so between that, threatening a lawsuit, and then 20 grand on an engine, I was just done. Forget it. I want to get out of construction. This industry doesn't work. Like going through that thing and telling myself that construction is not scalable and it's just, this industry sucks and all that. And I called up my original mentor and I said, hey man, I want to get out of this thing. I'm selling everything. And I had a lot of the same equipment and a lot of the same trucks. I had a couple dualies and trailers and equipment at that point, and then 5 W-2s left. And so I ended up selling everything to him. And through that contract, I had to maintain, I had like $150,000 of backlog that went with the deal. And then just to make sure that the crews that I had running, still kept and maintained through that merge, using some of the knowledge I'd gotten prior when I originally sold the maintenance accounts. So we ended up doing that. And then 6 months later, I was doing all the sales because that was part of our contract and maintaining that. And it just blew up because his skill set was primarily in operations. He'd been around for a long time, but technologically, there just wasn't a lot there. And so I came in and my strength was sales and business development and things like that. And his strength was operations, and it just blew up. And that's now where we are now. So that went from, $1.2 million pace to now we're bumping the 350s and 400s every month. And it's going, I don't see any end in sight.
That's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. You fell victim to the atypical business owner problem. And I went through it in my past businesses, which is why I didn't go through it this time. But we don't develop the right systems and processes in advance. And then we get so busy with the day-to-day that we just push off the tasks we don't want to do, but we don't fully train the people to do it. And and for you, like, you're lucky you had somebody that you could work with to help. I mean, I don't want to say bail you out, but I mean, like, take that stress off your shoulders so you could see the light again, because it is like, when it's black, it's black. Like, you just feel like you're the only one in the world that's going through these problems. And why is everything happening to me? And you have no ability to reflect and look backwards. And it sounds like you have now.
And it was also a huge ego check at that point, because I mean, my answer to the question earlier, I bought my first skid steer because, to be honest, I wanted to see my sticker on the side of the machine and say I had one. And at that point, I had never worked for anybody. I did, and not necessarily that I was an employee for the company. I mean, it was on a contractual basis, and it's not like anybody had a calendar for me every day. But it was one of those things to where I remember the day where we merged and all of my guys showed up at their laydown yard, and all my guys were taking off their company clothes and throwing all my tools into their trucks and answering to their foreman. And it was kind of a sad day, to be honest. And looking back on it, I mean, I'm glad all that happened, because I wouldn't have the knowledge I have now of how to work with someone with an alternative skill set and then add to that business and grow that business, which is what we're doing now with companies similar in the industry. But you just got to value, I mean, put an earmark on those kinds of hard times, because it's the only thing that'll make you appreciate when it's good, and the only thing that'll give you the knowledge to make it good.
Yeah. Every perceived failure, I say perceived because I don't think anything in life's a failure, because you're out doing something. Mm-hmm. It's just learning a way that it doesn't work, so you can adapt and overcome and change your style.
Yeah. 100%.
So you just talked about, just a minute ago, the companies you work with, and I kind of got the feel that, like, sure, you're not done with just one company.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the whole idea, I own a company called Adams and Alley that it's a corporation that got formed earlier last year. And this company was technically my first acquisition. And it's just me in this specific business that owns the actual equity in these businesses. My partner is the one that owns the other percentage of the company that I bought last year. However, the idea is to work with a very small amount of companies. This isn't something that is a mass scale work with 100 different people at the same time. But there are very specific companies that, if you can do a handstand and pat your tummy and say the alphabet backwards, that's the kind of people we're working with. It's very specific. And so there's a lot of guys that are in the stormwater industry that primarily are doing dam reconstruction, culverts, storm systems around neighborhoods in the failed space, not necessarily new construction, that if they just knew the right people to call and they knew the right kind of way to introduce themselves to engineers and property managers and the right person to hire at certain scale in the company, when to rent, when to save, how much cash they need in their account, if they knew all of those things at the $500,000, $800,000, $1 million mark, that it would completely unbottleneck the company. And again, I'm not looking to have these people give themselves away. I mean, it is an it's a cash injection upon purchase, but the idea is to form a company that is I wouldn't say a conglomerate, but if they're in the similar location, primarily in the Southeast, they can achieve economies of scale with the synergies that come from having just more resources spread out. And so as our jobs are getting farther and farther and farther, let's say out of state, being which I'm in Georgia, so like Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, stuff like that. We've been getting offers to open up offices down there, but to be honest, I would prefer to work with a company that's down there already, that already has 20 years of reputation, and if they just knew the right things to do, could completely unbottleneck the company and grow quite larger. And so now the company that I'm involved with right now, this is not a turn and burn kind of thing. These are long-term horizons. And so this company has already grown leaps and bounds. And with the same management team that we've built from 1 to 3-ish million, which is really where that all forms up and where you have the finances to make that happen, the same exact management team with just a little bit of tweak could go probably around 10 to 15 million, I would say. Mm-hmm. I've got a couple other mentors that are much larger than the people I'm involved with now, that run $30 million companies or 70s. And there's one that's knocking on 200 that I can call for questions. And they're all using the same systems, the same kind of operating metrics that we've got, and which is where I derived a lot of it.
Yeah.
But that's been tremendously helpful.
So I hear two things in this conversation. Mm-hmm. One, people are programmed to offer help when asked, which is how you get a mentor. You don't wait for them to call you, you call them, which sounds like you've done a very good job with in your young career and surrounded yourself with great people. And then two, you keep saying everyone's using the same system. So I like to refer to that as a framework. So like the pieces in the framework can change a little bit, but I mean, you have to have framework, whether you're doing $50,000 a year in business or $50 million a year in business. You have to have a framework. That you just have to have the rules, and everyone's got a plan to get punched in the mouth. So when you get punched in the mouth, what's your plan? What's your framework? How do you get through this? What's the contingency plans? What's your process? And it's just key for any size business. Even people doing work on the side, like they just do a weekend work, like have your framework.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you, when you were younger, I mean, I guess even now, like you've got a larger company, you're looking at acquiring other companies. Do you know the values that you have individually and as a company? And do you try to pair the companies you want to partner with in the future to match those values? So it's a good fit and you don't have those value struggles as far as what's important to you and what's important to the other owner?
Yeah, I think it goes two-pronged. I mean, there is things that are said on the ground as far as our crews go that in terms of completing a project, interfacing with customers. But I would say every single one of it, all of it revolves around honesty, integrity, and humility. Because I think if you have those qualities, then competency is huge. Obviously, if someone is incompetent, they're just not fit for the kind of role they're in, that is a big deal. But if that's the bare minimum of just having someone that's competent, able to do the work, able to facilitate the things that you need, and then you pair those with, I guess, the stars being the honesty, integrity, humility, that's a great way to filter someone you can work with. Because I do believe there's a lot of people that are willing to work, but there are fewer amount of people that are willing to work that have those qualities.
Yeah.
And so
humility being the number one.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be able to take constructive criticism. I've always been told that unasked for advice is criticism, but a lot of times, if you are a manager or you're someone that has a team underneath them, whether it's being a foreman with guys on the ground or in the management team talking to the foreman, you have to be able to communicate. And if you take every piece of advice as criticism, it's very challenging to get anything done as a company. Yeah. And so I think we've done a really, really good job of manifesting that in our company. And a lot of the people that work with us, I believe if I made a phone call and said, hey, here's what's happening, here's the deal, and if we do this, I believe it'll fix it. They're able to receive that and they're able to reciprocate what feedback they have. Because I think it goes both ways. I don't think top-down leadership, where the person that's above that person is the only person that can say anything, I believe that is cancerous in a business. I think that getting into a roundtable meeting at least every once in a while and going over some of these things to where they can also comment on the management as well in a respectful way, of course, it helps everything come full circle and not just be one person shooting at a wall.
Yep. I agree 10,000%. Larger companies with their management teams, I really think you should have those open roundtable forums where everyone's opinions heard, their concerns, their pros, their cons. Granted, the owner might make the decision and everyone understands and respects that because it's his company, but they all know that they've been heard and they're not criticized for their difference of opinion. And then these smaller companies, getting your employees in, because those are going to be your leaders as you scale and grow.
Absolutely.
And if you never ask for their advice or opinion, then they'll only give you criticism when you do it wrong.
Yeah. And then they start spreading rumors behind your back with everybody. And
then you get the cancer culture.
Yeah. It just infects the whole batch of apples.
Yeah. So now your title is actually the CEO, correct?
That's right.
And then how many people are in the company that you're managing?
We've got 25 people.
25 people. So as a CEO, I'm sure you have a lot of day-to-day tasks to make sure the company moves forward and moves on. But do you put your culture of the company pretty high on your priority list?
Absolutely. 100%. And it comes and goes as far as the busyness day to day. I think the primary role of the CEO being the chief executive officer, I think the chief executive officer and the chief operations officer, which is my partner, they're on the same place. And so I think that is important. I manage the management team and he manages our operations director and everything below that, which is all of operations. And so originally when I thought of what would an org chart per se, or what I like to call a responsibilities chart, I had the CEO above that when really that's not true. I think the CEO and the COO are actually right here. And especially in construction specifically, where it's super heavy on operational personnel, that you have to be completely congruent in those two roles. And so the data that I get from him from operations is what helps me manage the management team and interface with all of our larger customers and keep all of that in line. And then vice versa with me. And so I think my chief role outside of just making sure sales, office, and finance is getting taken care of correctly and business development is being available to solve the most difficult problem in the company. So I don't think if you're in that position and you've got that team, that if you have every minute of your day just blocked on calendars for just trying to stay busy, I think when problems do come up, you need to be able to go at the drop of a hat and solve those difficult problems, whether it's with a customer, it's an interpersonal problem with an employee, or it's just some kind of issue that comes up that's complex that eventually works its way up to you. You've got to be able to have time and effort to be able to distribute at any point in the day. And so I think it's a very fluid thing. I don't think it's something that I stack myself with tasks all day, every day, but it's a balance of monitoring during the day and then solving the most difficult problem at hand.
Yep. So we'll preface this by saying he would never remember this happening, but I live in Peoria, Illinois, and for 100 years, this was Caterpillar's world headquarters.
Yeah.
And running into the CEO one day and just having a conversation at a bar while we waited for our table for dinner, I asked him, like, hey, what's the key role of, being the CEO of a Fortune, 2010 company?
Yeah.
He's just like, communicating the vision of the company and making sure that the culture allows your team to grow and have flexibility to make decisions so it's not all on your shoulders. And then he says, if you do nothing else as a business owner, ensure the culture's correct so that the team isn't stifled and they can actually grow and find solutions and do the work.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
And to hear that from a guy, running, I mean, he's on board of directors for how many companies, and he's got private security. And I'm like, like, who am I to tell you you're wrong? So, but I've that has stuck with me ever since that time. It's just like, don't get stuck doing the work, get stuck building the framework and the culture for others to be successful in.
Sure. And there's definitely stages to it. I mean, I know you work super heavily with companies on the smaller aspects, which is fantastic, just giving people direction. And I'm sure you would agree. I mean, there's definitely a line where you have to cross at some point, because when it's just you and you're, sub a couple $100,000 a year just trying to get off the ground. I mean, you're the man, the myth, the legend at that point. So
it is. And just to take a minute on that, like even the guys that are solo operators, I still tell them, like, is your goal to stay that way, or is it to be able to hire a few employees in a couple of years? Like, well, we want to hire and grow. I'm like, great. Then you need to start getting in the habit of like having your pre-job meeting, even though it's just you, and your post-job meeting. What right? What went wrong? What could have been better? And developing that communication framework, because when you hire employees, you're already going to be busy. And building that new habit of that communication pre, during, and post is not going to be a top priority because you're going to be so busy with work. But if it's already a habit you instilled when it's just you, it's going to be very easy to incorporate a few people into that same communication process.
And if you've already got the system, then you can just hand it to the employee once they're hired. It doesn't have to be some new thing that comes out of existence.
Right. But like we teach them we call them tailgate talks. Start your job, first 5 minutes, end your job, first 5 minutes, end of the day, 5 minutes. We had a plan. Did we stick to it? Did we have any issues arise? What went right? What went wrong? What took longer than expected? Why? And just asking those questions, you'll start seeing trends and you're like, okay, we need to adapt and change the way we need to adapt and change the company we have that brings the gravel, or we need to schedule it 30 minutes earlier because they're always 30 minutes late. But if you don't talk about it and have those conversations and you just keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. And as you know, that is literally the definition of insanity.
Yeah, been there before. So
I think we all have.
I think everybody has it.
Yeah, we all have been. So one of the other topics I really enjoy talking to guys with, and maybe it's more prevalent to your past experience than it is your current experience, marketing. Like what worked for you? What, did you find a special area that you just said, hey, I'm going to go all in over here, or did you shotgun spread it out across different platforms?
So originally, it's funny you asked that, because I did a lot of pay-per-click advertising, and I was on a lot of different platforms for the business, at least early on in the residential area. But now that we're in bigger commercial, it's really not as big of a focus. We're working on developing new medias for this company that'll come out shortly, and I'm excited for those. But the way you advertise is very different. And so when I was originally getting started, I used Nextdoor when they were like before Nextdoor even had ads. And so I was running those, and I had a personal account that I would post on it and comment on people's posts. And then I eventually got on Facebook a little while later. And then I hired someone to do a lot of our posts and then manage just a little bit of pay-per-click advertising. And at that point, like when I was doing less than $60,000 a month, there was a time where I was running between paying her $500 a month to do the postings and manage my site that I built personally. We were doing like $1,500 a month in advertising, which worked out pretty well, actually. I didn't niche down in the area as well as I should have, but in terms of the amount of business that we got from those leads driving them to our website, it worked out really well, especially in residential. I think moving into commercial, it's a little bit different of a game, because especially when you get into big ticket projects, especially stuff that's consistently in the 6 figures and bumping into the 7 figures, in the 6 figures, there's almost no chance of them calling off an ad. It might add credibility to you. So if they look you up, and let's say an engineer is trying to get a board of directors to decide on 3 companies, if they look you up on the internet, it's important to have a presence, but not necessarily as important to have, spending a ton on pay-per-click or things like that. It's more about a presence rather than trying to get you to click on something so you buy a product. Because those bigger kinds of projects are months and months or years sometimes of courting. And that's not something that's going to come off an advertisement.
No, and you can't use general advertising that's made for the masses when you're only trying, in your current situation, looking for 100, 200 engineers or city planners.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be more focused and needs to be changed and all that. But like when you were younger and you were doing $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month.
Yeah.
Did you say, hey, every month we're going to use the Nextdoor app, we're going to use Facebook, we're going to use Google, we're going to do direct mail, we're going to do email? Or do you just say, you know what, I'm just going to use one and I'm going to get really, really good at it?
I think, to be honest, I should have used one to get really good at it, which I'm still struggling with now, just getting personally on social media, trying to decide which way is the best way. But if I had to do it again, I think I would make an account. If I was just getting started again, what I'd say is I think you should make an account on all of them. And when I say that, you don't have to post on all of them, but you have an account and then to be really good at one of them. And so what at least happened with me that helped out a lot, I had my Google page, which you can get for free. And when someone looks you up, if you have accounts registered on all of them, then it'll come up all the way down Google in the entire first page. And so again, I'm marketing on pay-per-click is not my specialty. We have people that help us with that. And so I don't want to say something that I'm not, an expert on necessarily. But from my personal experience doing that, it was great to fill up the whole first page on Google. And then Nextdoor and Facebook is really where we did a lot of advertising, and then as well as Google. But I think Google by far was the best for us. I mean, I would say almost by a long shot, most of the form submissions that we had come in on our website were all from Google. And if I had to put the others on a pedestal for just providing presence, then Google definitely took the trophy for actually getting in form submissions.
Yeah. So we find that like using that Google My Business and like making sure you take the time to set it up properly, and being very descriptive, answer the FAQs, have your holiday hours, be very long paragraph form in what you do. I mean, yeah, it sucks. You guys run equipment all day. You don't sit at a computer. So it's an inconvenience, but it's a one-time job. Once you get that done, it just keeps working for you in the background. It's worth the time investment.
100%.
So like Google and then the reviews, that can work for you all the time. And I'm a firm believer, like Facebook's great for getting instant work or starting an instant conversation, but nobody's going to go back. Nobody's going to find your ad from last month and call you on Facebook. You have to continually do new ones. Where Google, they could just, hey, search for stormwater runoff my area. Your company pops up. You've got 47 reviews. Hey, I'm going to go look at their website. They've been around the area for a while. That's not happening on Facebook.
You're going to go through a lot of conversations on Facebook Marketplace trying to get grading jobs.
Yeah.
A whole lot.
Absolutely. And Google My Business is free. I trust every small business should have that presence and have it done right. And then if you're sub 50, 60K a month, you should be pounding Facebook for new business and then asking them for the reviews so that you can build the organic stuff naturally without waiting for it to happen to grow your business. In my opinion.
I agree with that. And you can have a lot of sweat equity in that as well. I mean, without pay-per-click advertising, if you're just hustling on Facebook, you can generate a lot of business. It takes a lot of work, but you can generate a lot of business for free.
Yeah. And you can't believe the people that are doing it. I hear all the time. I had this guy call me up and he was like, I've been watching your videos on Facebook for the last 6 months. I'm ready to have you come give me an estimate. So it's just the consistency of your posts.
Yeah.
What you do, awesome. How you do it, the values that your company has. But I always think like marketing is always that one area that a lot of smaller businesses struggle with. And so I just like to always get the perspective of everyone on the show, just like what worked for you to help you scale and grow.
And I also think just seeking out information that's valid from a valid source. And I think I'm a firm believer in exhausting all of your free resources before you start spending a ton of money. But I do believe in education up front. And so I know you offer a service like that. And for me, it was just calling the sides of trucks and sitting down with people. But especially for a reasonable price, if you can have someone just grab you by the shoulders and point you in the right direction, at least for a little while, you can walk 500 miles in the wrong direction and you still walked the same distance. But if you're pointing in the right direction, it can make all the difference and you can mitigate a lot of stupid mistakes early on.
You're absolutely right. And like our coaching program, we're seeing a lot of success for the last year or so with the clients that joined that. and helping them scale and grow their business and be on the right track. But I also will preach to everybody, I'm like, if you're not comfortable investing in that, go talk to other business owners. And I'm telling you, if you open your ears and close your mouth, you can talk to the owner of a beauty salon and you will find out something she is doing to get people interested in her services that you can say, oh, I can maneuver that and make it work for Excavation by doing this.
Yeah.
Most of the things we do at Skid Steer Nation for our marketing did not come from marketing skid steer attachments, looking at other companies that do that. It came from looking at other successful companies in other industries and other niches and wondering how did they do that, and then asking them. And because I'm not a competitor, they were very open with me what they do and how they do it. And I was able to take that, maneuver it, switch it, and make it work for what we do for our business.
Absolutely.
But there's lessons everywhere if you're just open to looking for them.
It's a blue ocean.
Yeah, I just was watching YouTube and this video popped up and he was showing you how to make $200,000 a year making videos with AI software and this video editor. And I'm like, oh yeah, another gimmick thing, right? And as I watched it for a few minutes and I was like, I could use that same framework that he's using for that to actually describe some of our products better in short YouTube videos and TikTok. And I was like, huh.
Yeah, get what you can out of it at least.
Yeah, I found some guy trying to, sell his software of how to teach you this strategy. And I'm like, oh, I can maneuver that and make it work for me. Where if I was closed-minded, I would have been like, well, he's an idiot and just turned it off.
Yeah, you can definitely pull something from everybody.
Yeah, 100%.
There's nuggets lying around everywhere.
And I've actually learned a lot more by talking to the people who so-called failed, because those are the lessons that matter most, like what not to do. It's like you did, like you'll never hire another salesman and not train him and vet him.
Yeah, the next time around, it was a very different process.
Exactly.
It was a very short leash for a long time.
Yeah, exactly, man.
But you can't wear it forever. So.
Yeah. God, just to kind of recap here, you had a want for a vehicle that got you out in the public looking for ways to make money, that just continued to snowball and grow year after year and lead you into heavy equipment. And then you found your niche between your mentors and your market area. And now you're able to take that niche, continue to learn and develop your business acumen, and continue to grow and modify that so that you can scale and grow that outside of your current area.
Absolutely.
And we did that in 7 years.
100%. And excited for the future. And
That's crazy.
I think construction is, and one thing to add, to that, we'll probably close soon, but I think there's a lot of people that are leaving construction on a big level. And I think of the majority, if there's 100 people that are graduating school, the majority of them are not thinking about getting into heavy equipment and excavation and just the dirt world in general. And I think podcasts like this are important, and just people that are on social media, because I think as a whole, this industry isn't as savvy as a lot of others, like real estate or tech or anything like that. And as people are looking to find ways to make money online and this, that, and the other, and go into those different categories of business, construction gets overlooked because it's not pretty, I guess. But in terms of scalability, I don't know of any other industry that sells higher ticket items. And, you can be a real estate agent and sell houses, but you're getting a little percentage. And it's also, you can't sell a real estate agency. I'm sure you can, but not as an individual number. And so construction, you can fit a multi-million-dollar company inside one project. Yeah. And I personally don't know of any other industries to where you can do that. And obviously you can't just go from zero to that, because there's a lot of learning curves in between. But in terms of getting something off the ground and then going to the sky, once you start getting into this situation where you can get those 6-figure jobs, and now we're knocking on the 7-figure jobs, you can fit a massive company into a very short period of opportunity, which I think is an important thing to understand.
No, and it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And just to kind of comment on that, like you talk about the tech savvy aspect of that, I don't think it's because of the operators and business owners in the industry. I'm 45 and, Facebook and phones and apps are part of my everyday life. And I'm sure it is about everybody else, even at our age. I think the biggest hurdle we face in this industry is like, if I'm a small business in Peoria, Illinois, and I'm looking for somebody to help me do my marketing and sales, I can't find a company that understands the industry. So now I have to teach them. And that becomes such a wall that we don't do it. We don't learn it because nobody gets what we do or how we do it. And we don't get what they do. And we just can't find that middle ground to be able to be cohesive and work together.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, you can find a local marketing company, like a guy in Tennessee finds a local marketing company, and the girl comes out and she's like, "Oh, this thing's really cool. How's it work? What's it do? What can you do with it?" And you're like, "You're supposed to be generating me leads and interest. I'm not supposed to be teaching you what a skid steer is." Like,
yes, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, and that's the gap for our industry, is that it's hard to find tech professionals that understand and get what we do. And we spend that time talking and teaching them, and it feels like we're getting nowhere. So we just quit.
Yeah. And
we'll go back to the word of mouth.
And you just start blaming the internet doesn't work and you can't trust anybody, and it's a whole road. So it is pretty cool that people like you are coming around and specializing in that business. It's not something that I've seen a whole lot of, and I think it's saturated everywhere else but construction. And there's a heck of a lot of need for it.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, you look at GPS technology, how far behind agriculture was behind construction. And now I would almost say agriculture is ahead of construction with GPS.
They've got some pretty crazy stuff now.
Right. But 15 years ago, like, you couldn't get a farmer to put that on his tractor.
Yeah.
And now they won't buy it without it. Yeah. They just, they saw the value. Like, oh, how many more bushels do I get per acre with this? And I can get so, and it's the same thing with this industry. We just got to work with them, and you'll find, as this younger generation becomes the norm, you'll see more and more businesses treat it like a real business that has their brick and mortar website. I call them brick and mortar websites, because you don't have a store they can walk into, and be a little bit more tech savvy as the older crowd that never had that growing up starts to retire and get out of the industry.
It makes a huge difference if you can get it figured out.
Yeah,
or
sure
find
does.
somebody that can.
Yeah, well, Reese, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy day and joining us for the podcast, sharing your story and your advice. It's very wise advice, if I want to go back to that old adage of how young you are. But at the same point, you have put the work in, you have found the mentors, you have done the research and homework to get to this level in your life. And, age is probably not a number for you anymore. It's just business acumen and surrounding yourself with the right network. And you are definitely doing that. So congratulations for everything you've accomplished. I'm excited to continue to watch you grow and see where you take this thing in the next 5, 10, 20 years. Yeah.
Thank you for having me on the show. And if there's anything I can do, or anybody that can take anything out of this, I hope you can go make a bunch of money with it. And
I just want to say real quick, if you are on Facebook and you search his name, Reese Alley, he also has a private Facebook group where he just pulls his phone out, shoots some videos, answers questions, and he's offering free advice for people in this industry to help grow their business.
Absolutely. I hope you all can get something from it.
Absolutely, Reese. Well, we appreciate it. And everyone here listening, again, just to recap, we need you to subscribe to the podcast so we know you're watching it. We know that our work and effort is paying off and you're enjoying the content. Please share it. That's how we grow our end of it. And as Reese was mentioning earlier, finding mentors and investing in knowledge is a very key part of growing your business. And that's why I just want to remind you all that Groundbreaking Growth is the new business that Skid Steer Nation is a part of. We just recently launched it. It is a business development program where we work in 3 phases: define, profit, and scale. So who you are, what you do, why you do it, how to make a lot of money doing that, and then how to scale and grow the company to the level you want it to be. So if you'd like to learn more about that, go to groundbreakinggrowth.com. There's a submission form there if you'd like to get on a phone call and talk with me. So it will not be another salesperson. It will actually be myself. So thanks everyone for listening and tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Skid Steer Nation podcast.